All right, we're here. It's time. It's the moment I think everybody has been waiting for. Luke, Nate, it's time to get blurry.
It's time to get blurry.
It is.
We are we going live?
We're live. Yeah,
We are live.
we are live. Hey, you know what? This is weird. Let's just address this right off the
Yeah.
bat for everybody that's tuning in. Normally, when we do a podcast for Blurry Creatures, it's not live streamed right now to who knows how many people.
Yeah.
And typically we have a good 15 to 20 minutes to just talk about really weird stuff. But I feel
We got that out of the way already.
We did. I don't know. Half the time we can release that content though, right?
Yeah, it's good. Joel, we were talking about 80s baseball, starting lineups for the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. We got that out of the way, so now we can talk about theology.
Yeah.
you want to know what I know about baseball? Here's the only thing that I know about baseball, that the
What?
greatest basketball player of all time absolutely made me weep with tears of depression when he tried to play baseball.
Oh yeah.
Play for Birmingham.
And that was sad.
Yeah.
That was sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Jordan.
There's
That's not
some-
LeBron James for all you young
There's some
youngsters.
conspiracy theories about why he had to play baseball for a few years, but that's not what this podcast is about.
That's the hey man, everybody's got, this is like sin, right? Like everybody's got their own thing that they're walking through. I feel like that's a very
Luke's taking the
theological idea.
You know how what, should we talk about how this whole thing started, Joel?
Let's
Okay.
do that. Hey, really quick
yeah.
before we get started though. I've had this up my sleeve, is it an ace up your sleeve? Is that what the saying is? I've had an ace up my sleeve for a while. And here's the thing, you guys, I want to flip the script on you. You see, you thought this was going to be a live podcast recording and we do like the normal Blurry Creatures thing, but this is like a collab thing. And so
Yeah.
if you're tuning in on Instagram right now, you may want to just go ahead and jump over to the YouTube site because you're going to see video. It's going to be super fun. But here's the first thing I want to start with, Luke and Nate. You guys typically ask, your guests about who do you ask about?
Who do we ask about?
Who, Bigfoot?
Yeah.
That's right.
Like the first question, right? I'm gonna flip
Only
this
240 plus episodes. Yeah, we ask every time. Yeah.
every time. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Oh, here we go.
Oh man,
And-
I can
and-
only imagine Joel.
He's turning the tables.
I'm turning the tables. Here's my question for you. What is the strangest Bible story, verse, script? Like, what is the strangest, weirdest thing that just makes you like roll your eyes and think like, what the heck is going on with this?
Luke, you're first.
I could not go what came to my mind first. There are two, and they're not appropriate for family shows.
Yeah, Luke has some. There's certain verses that stick out in your mind. Usually,
They definitely are.
they're more for the locker room.
Strangest thing. I mean, Balaam and the Talking Donkey is always one we kind of go to because it's fascinating that you have this donkey that just starts speaking after he's getting beat. It's I mean, it's a wild story, right? It's just sort of thrown in there, and you
Yeah.
just feel like you could jump into an episode of Shrek or something in the middle of the Bible.
Yeah.
Nate?
That's a strange one. I would say, I don't have any. I don't know if this is funny, but it's definitely I think the thing that gave me a lot of pause was, did zombies walk around in the hours following the crucifixion?
On the resurrection.
They appeared to many because supposedly the dead in Christ came out and walked around. So what did that look like? Were they in new bodies, or were they in their old, dead bodies?
This is a good question. This is a really good question because I don't know that they're in their new bodies yet, because Thessalonians talks about how the dead in Christ will be risen and then they'll receive their new bodies in the new heavens and the new earth. So I kind of think that either there's some type of zombie-like experience or it's like ghosts, like actually ethereal ghost figures just like strolling through the cities of Jerusalem.
Which is weird either way, but
That's crazy.
I think it'd be cool if they were like in the zombie form and just.
Well, if they're ghosts, they'd probably be in like Civil War uniforms, since like all the ghosts that we have here are just all from the Civil War. It would only make sense, right?
Could have been like the
Makes
Pirates of the
sense.
Caribbean, where
Dude, it
depending
could have
on
been, yeah, like the
depending
Black
on
Pearl.
the, if it was at night, maybe you'd see them how they really were, but during the day you couldn't tell.
That's right.
We don't know.
That's right.
Doesn't really-
Well, I
Johnny
just
Depp.
want to let everybody know that it's been wondering, like, how do podcasts start, and how do these things get started? You just experienced the like beginnings that typically Nate will cut out because it was just ridiculous. So
I
so
do
there you go,
think-
Nate.
I do think the one I would have said if I would have thought about it more would the one where the guy got called bald. They called the guy bald. Who they call bald? And the bears came out and ate him. The kids?
The
What
bear with the kids. They who they make fun of? They made fun of like Elijah. Was it Elijah or
Yeah,
Elisha?
they called him Baldy. And
Yeah.
then the bears came out and ate the kids for making fun of him.
That's right.
What about when Philip
That just-
What about when Philip translated? And
For
stepped
every-
into dude, I mean, this is starting to get us going here.
Yeah.
Hey
Some
man,
weird stuff.
I'm just letting you also know on
That's not
behalf
very
of every guest of the Blurry
Oh.
Creatures podcast episodes,
I-
you guys can
Fair.
all thank me for putting Luke and Nate on the hot seat. See,
Yeah.
this is what we feel, guys.
Yeah.
When you ask us, what do you think about Bigfoot? This is
Yeah.
the blood that started rushing to your head. You know how your face got a little bit of red? My face can't get red,
Yeah.
but your faces can get red. You know what I'm saying? Like
My face is always red.
Yeah, it's kind of goes with the territory.
I'm just either always embarrassed or
sunburned
born
because
this
it's the wrong
way.
time of year. Yeah.
we don't know.
all right, Nate, why are
Have
we
to
here?
Light bulbs. That's what the doctor said.
That's good for you. Take some black.
I don't
light.
know. What do you need? Well, you need something from us, Joel, and you're not going to get any like real in-depth, brain power over here. But we're going to try today. And this whole thing started. Maybe I should kick us off because a lot of people jump into our podcast, episode 200, episode 150, and we're way down the blurry trail, And Joel's like, I think we talked about this in Costa Rica when you helped. We were like not on stage, just kind of talking about just the phenomena that's happening around this podcast. And you were like, there needs to be some sort of blurry 101. People need to understand, even if they join the podcast year 4, right where they are, because a lot of people don't have the time and the ability to go back and start listening to the podcast from the beginning and figure out like what you and I have learned. And Joel's like, dude, I'll help you do it. So here we are. Stranger Theology, Blurry 101. How do you make sense from, and a lot of people come from that sort of avenue. They go to church, they talk to their pastor, but this is considered like some sort of weird, strange theology to them. Or Deuteronomy 32, what does that mean? Psalm 82.
Genesis 6.
Yeah.
I mean, Genesis 3. How do these things all connect?
And how do you tell your friends about it?
Yeah, so Nate makes a great point, Joel. Like, what we wanted to do was to create, some sort of foundational, some, if you will, requisite knowledge to people to get in. Because our podcast, if you've listened or if you're tuning in, as a new listener, we look at all the weird and strange and everything that's happening, in ancient history, today, in the Bible. We look at it all through a biblical worldview. That's really that's our crux of our show. And so.
Yeah.
If we're to look at things and evaluate things and create this, create our paradigm around our faith, what are the foundational elements of that?
Where do you start?
And luckily for us, Joel and I, we got to meet a couple of years ago at an event and became fast friends because of our mutual love for the late Dr. Michael Heiser, and his work with Unseen Realm. And you studied under Mike, and we became fast friends. And Mike is really seminal to our show, really inspiration for our show. His methodology, his viewpoint, his way of reading the Bible, his way of talking about the Bible being written, for us but not to us, and how we're meant to understand the weird stuff as we just sort of kick the show off in the Old Testament. Like, how are we meant to do that? And so, you're a theologian, and we kind of joke, but we mean this, saying you're like you're the coolest theologian we know, right? And you're our pal, and you study under Mike, and you also did your New Testament work sort of from this viewpoint and worldview. And what is that, right? And I don't know, it's implicit when we're in episode 240 plus we're at now. It's sort of implicit in our show, but it's good to go back to the beginning. Princess Bride, we're in 80s shows, right? So Vicini said to go back to the beginning, and this is where I'm at. This is where it started. So we go back to the beginning, and that's kind of in some ways what we're trying to do here. We're going back to the beginning and talking about the very foundational theological core aspects of divine counsel worldview, of Deuteronomy 32 worldview, all these things that that really make the blurry verse make sense.
Yeah. Well, I love it. So I know as we kind of begin to talk about this, for me, it is very much about honoring Mike. His work is so significant, and I'm really standing on the shoulders of all of Mike's work for so long. And if you've listened to any of the episodes or you've read any of Mike's books, you'll know that Mike would say that his watershed moment was when he came across Psalm 82, you know? And my watershed moment is when I met Mike. And Mike has had this great way of articulating and synthesizing what he sought to do in terms of biblical theology and scripture. And what he was trying to do was, and this is his language, he would say, hey, I never had a new thought. I never had a novel thought. You know, all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to collect a bunch of these biblical thoughts and ideas. I'm trying to then connect these dots. And then I want to communicate these dots in a way that it makes sense. And the reason why I think the work that you guys are doing with Blurry Creatures and the episodes is, for a long time, a lot of people have studied the Bible, me included. It felt like we would just be so happy to read about Genesis 1, 2, and 3, deal with 4, Cain and Abel, you know, the murder that took place. No big deal. And then Genesis 6 hits and we pick up at Noah. And it's like, wait a minute. There's like a couple verses, Genesis 6, 1 through 5, that take place before Noah. And yet, why is it that there are these cosmic supernatural elements of scripture? And in those spaces, I refer to this as theological dishonesty. It feels like there's this theological dishonesty where we're just unwilling to just deal with the text the way the ancient Israelites would have understood the scriptures themselves. And so I'm excited for this because one of the things that you're going to notice, I'm going to do a little bit differently. And again, if you're on Instagram, that's amazing. You might want to jump over to YouTube and watch this on YouTube Live, because I'm going to do a screen share. You're going to get this. So Mike would often start in Psalm 82, but I want to start actually with the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe. And so if you see my screen, you guys will notice first on the left-hand side here, I've got the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe. And, you know, guys, one of the things is, actually, let's do this before I even get there. Let's just do a thought experiment. Okay. Here's a thought experiment. I've already got messages from my friends. They're like, Joel, I cannot believe that you're going to do a live stream when it's game 4 of the Mavs versus the Wolves, right? So like, yeah, like people, my crowd is like, what are you doing? So just quick question, guys. When I say that, what am I talking about?
Talking about basketball, I know that.
Yeah, but what are the Mavs and who are the Wolves?
Well, this is game 4. Mavs are up 3-0. I don't even watch the NBA, but I kind of followed on my ESPN app because I feel like this is a whole nother. We can derail this quickly, Joel, but how soft the NBA has become since when we were kids in the late 80s, early 90s. So, but
very soft.
But you're in the Western Conference Finals. This game could be the sweep game. So,
that's right.
Good on you. I know you're a big NBA guy. So
right.
I thought you were talking about Top Gun for a second.
Well, there's.
No.
It would have been Goose, though. It would have been Mav and Goose, and that would have made not a lot of sense.
Nate, I love when you derail my illustrations. That's probably one of my favorite things about you, Nate, is you've got a knack, the spiritual gift of derailing illustrations. It's actually kind of brilliant. No, so I said Mavs and I said Wolves, and you guys instantly were able to connect it to the NBA. Well, what is the NBA? The National Basketball Association, right? But notice what we just did. You guys were able to take words that are rooted in social, historical, cultural context and create a framework around it. So why didn't you think about actual mavericks? Like, I think they're horses, right? Like mavericks are like known as horses, and wolves, like actual animals. Like, why didn't you think about those things? And if I were to say Kyrie and Luka on the Mavs, why didn't you think about 2 horses named Kyrie and Luka, right?
Well, more interesting actually, Joel, if we did. But
yeah. There, thanks, Luke. Now you have rubbed off on Nate on the illustration derailing.
No, but this is a good illustration, Joel, because what you're talking about is cultural nuance, cultural context, and understanding that these things implicit because of the time we're alive, because of the cultural relevance, because frankly, we're sports and sports guys, and that's in addition to being theologians and podcasters. So this is sort of an implicit cultural knowledge that we have that makes it not horses and not wolves, but in fact, Game 4 kind of gave it away. But
exactly. So, okay, the Bible. This is going to be fascinating. This is going to be wild for y'all. The Bible was not written in English. Like what? The Bible in the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, some Aramaic, and in the New Testament in Koine Greek. Now, here's the deal. Language is embedded with culture. Language is embedded with culture. And one of the biggest mistakes that we can make when it comes to theology and studying the scriptures, especially when it comes to the blurry, supernatural, cosmic realities of the text, is we're trying to impose a 21st century understanding into ancient texts. And that's not what we ought to do. What we ought to try to do is jump into these passages of scripture and try to retrieve the worldview, the framework that the ancient Israelites themselves were understanding. So on my screen here, you've got, I want to kind of start with this. This is how the ancient Hebrews would have understood the earth, the world, right? So notice what you have here on the left-hand side. You've got like God, who's the God of the heavens. You've got almost this portal that's going in between like the upper heavens into the waters above the firmament. And then maybe one of the more important things is you've got the presence of these mountains over here. You've got the sea that's all around it. And underneath it, here you have Sheol. This is the place where the dead would reside. And if this was even more kind of concrete and specific, Sheol would be separated into two places. You would have the resting place of the righteous dead of the Old Testament, but then you would have the depths of Hades. I'm using a Greek term there. And this is the place where we're going to talk about Genesis 6, where the fallen watchers, the sons of God of Genesis 6, are imprisoned because of their rebellion, their supernatural rebellion. So this is the conception of the ancient Hebrews. This is how they would have understood the way that the world is framed and how God interacts. Now, the reason why I want to show this image specifically is because of the presence of these mountains over here. So in the ancient Hebrew worldview, and also of the ancient Near Eastern civilizations, the people, Mesopotamians, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Egyptians, all these folks, they understood that the mountains were the place where God met with humanity. The mountains were the place where God met with humanity. So this is incredibly important because when we open up Genesis 1, 2, and 3, and we get to Eden, we find that Eden is actually on a mountain. So on your own time, you can go and read all about Eden, and you can notice that the rivers in Eden are flowing down. But I want to give you a textual space where you can actually go and look, and it's actually the origin story of Satan. It's in Ezekiel 28:13. Look at this. It says, you were in Eden, the garden of God. This is the story of the Garden of Eden. It says every precious stone was your covering. And then all these lists of stones. And then 14, this is so important. You were, and this is talking about Lucifer, you were an anointed guardian cherub. Well, guys, who's placed in Eden after Adam and Eve are kicked out in order to protect Eden from people coming back in?
It's an angel with a flaming sword.
Cherubim. Yeah, cherubim. This is fascinating. But look at this. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walk, right? And then 16b. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O guardian cherub. This is actually pretty important for our understanding of cosmic geography, because right off the bat in Eden, what we have the presence of is not a simply earthly physical garden where it's like, oh, Adam and Eve are going to be gardeners today. Like they're going to go out, they're going to plant some trees, they're going to plant some, have some fruit. Like you have the presence of Adam and Eve, who are the divine royal children of God, who are actually part of the divine council of God. Well, where does God meet with humanity? On mountains. What is the location of his council? On top of mountains. Why is it that wild things throughout scripture tend to happen on mountains? Think about Abraham and Isaac, Mount Moriah. Think about Moses, Mount Sinai. Think about Genesis 6, Mount Hermon. Let's fast forward into the New Testament. Oh, what happens on the Mount of Transfiguration? Oh, yeah, right? Oh, who gets crucified on a hill, on a mountain? Jesus, Mount Golgotha, right? So you have the presence of mountains as a consistent theme throughout the Old and New Testament. And when we see mountains in our brains, we should be thinking like the ancient Israelites. We should be thinking, oh, this is the place where God meets with man. This is cosmic and supernatural in nature. In a different episode on Blurry Creatures, I talked about the 3 cosmic rebellions. We live in a society, y'all, where we're trying to separate the supernatural from the earthly, right? Like everything supernatural, put in a nice little bucket over here. Everything that is earthly, put in a nice little bucket over here. And yet the biblical worldview never separated these two things. The supernatural and the earthly were always intimately connected together. And what happened in one sphere of reality impacted the other. And this is what we find. We could like fast forward. It's like, okay, Genesis 3, you've got a supernatural rebellion with the Nakash, the serpent, that Hebrew word Nakash. We could even turn there and you can see it. So in Genesis 3, you've got the serpent. Now that's down here on the bottom, you see Nakash. And it's interesting that the word for the serpent, the description is crafty. The serpent is crafty amongst all other things. Nate, I know you and I have talked in great detail about the situation with the serpent. But the Nakash, it can mean 3 things. It can mean a fiery bronze image. It can mean a garden cherub, or it can mean just a physical, literal snake. Well, what's happening in Genesis 3? Now that you and I know that the mountain is actually a cosmic mountain, we go in our brains, oh, supernatural and earthly are happening together. All 3 are at play there. This also makes sense of why in the world do Adam and Eve not freak out the second the Nakash starts speaking, right? Why aren't they like, oh my gosh, there's a supernatural being here? Because in Eden, it was common for supernatural beings to come in and out as part of God's divine counsel. And so what we find is a combination, a supernatural rebellion that's happening with this Nakash, and also an earthly rebellion that happened with Adam and Eve. And this sets the scene really for 2 more rebellions that are going to take place. Okay, I just did a lot.
Yeah.
Thoughts, reactions, disagreements?
No, I think it's important to lay down that foundation, because I think a lot of people, I think when we think about these things, I mean, there's still a lot of disagreement. Why do you think there's still to this stage, Joel, a lot of people that don't really know how to agree on even what Eden is, where Eden is? You know, like oftentimes on our show, people have different thoughts on this specific topic right here. Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is because, again, we're trying to rationalize something that is cosmic in nature, right? So we're trying to come to a rational earthly response to this, rather than considering if Eden was the cosmic mountain of God. It is the cosmic mountain of God. And we just saw in that ancient Hebrew conception of these layers almost of earthly and supernatural existence, Sheol, Hades, the 3rd heavens. Paul talks about that in Corinthians. If this is all true, then could it be possible that Eden is a legitimately literal place right now, which I would argue it is? It was sacred space. So God hides it away, places it away. And then in the New Testament, when Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you, where the heck is Jesus? What is Jesus talking about? Where is he going to go to prepare what place? And then in Revelation 21 and 22, Nate and Luke, like, how in the world does Eden return? But now it's not just a garden, it's a garden city. How can a garden turn into a city unless work is being done, vocation is being accomplished, right? This expands our paradigm for how we understand earthly and supernatural. And so when Jesus goes to prepare a place for us. He's actually in constant preparation, I think, of Eden, which is a physical place. And so in Revelation 21 and 22, when it comes back, it is a collision of the supernatural and the earthly, where it was always meant to be, in one existence, not separated into two. And so part of the reason of like, where was it? How can we find it? Whatever else. I think it's just God's providence. He's like, I'm not telling. This is the epic game of hide and go seek, and God's the best hider in all of existence. So we're probably not going to find it. Actually, we're not going to find it.
Even better than Bigfoot.
Even.
No, Joel, I think from a very general standpoint, I think it's so good to get back to the language as you did when we talk about the snake, right? This is such a weird, we talked about odd stories at the beginning, and you have a talking snake, right? And that's sort of the way we're presented this in growing up in church and Sunday school, and you color the pictures depending on what kind of church you went to. But understanding that this is a nakash and what that language means and what the interpretation means and what that would have meant to an ancient Semitic person. There's so much depth to that, and actually there's a lot of clarity at the same measure, because it is an odd story, and you wonder, like you said, wouldn't you think that Adam and Eve would be shocked to have a snake talking, but not in the sense of this being an Elohim, a supernatural being, a divine being, a member of the council, as you so eloquently pointed out in Ezekiel, then going here to Genesis. I just think it's a foundational point, because there are odd things in the Bible, right? And Mike just talked about if it's weird, it matters. And this one, of course, is everyone's heard. But I don't think we often take time, maybe in church especially, to really contextualize what's happening here, and who the players are. And that's what Nate and I talk about a lot. Who are the players on the chessboard, right? And this one is very key.
And the consequence of this too is, I think we typically think about this in terms of, again, purely earthly, purely like, oh, it's the serpent, oh, it's the Nakash. But there seems to be an unholy alliance that takes place with a physical, literal snake and Lucifer and the supernatural being, because the consequence that's given is for the animal itself. So again, just a big idea here, and this is just true of sin in general, and consequence of sin is it's never individualistic. Sin never just impacts a person individually. It is a compound impact communally. And so the sin of Eden has an impact not just to Adam and Eve, but to all of creation. Like all of creation, this is what it means when in Romans 8 it talks about creation is groaning. I was reading Abraham, a brilliant rabbi who has passed now, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and he had this statement once that I was reading, and I just thought it was so profound, that he said that the earth is the place that God created Adam, man, humanity, right? So he goes to the earth and he forms man, and he brings man up. And the way the Genesis 3 is presented, he picks up Adam and Eve and he places them in the holy mountain, the cosmic mountain of Eden. This is beautiful. Earth was never designed to be the burial ground of Adam and Eve. Like it was just never designed to be that. And because of sin, earth, like the earth itself is groaning, I think partially because it is having to receive the dead body of humanity back into its soil, and it was never intended to do so from the very beginning. And this is the evidence of humanity falling apart. The Balaam story, the donkey, I actually think is profound. I think C.S. Lewis gets it right in the Chronicles of Narnia. What if, just what if, animals actually could talk in Eden? What if part of the consequence is just not documented, but maybe it's alluded to by the fact that all of a sudden the donkey can talk, and now the donkey can't talk? What if in that moment, and this is speculative, I always like to clarify, like this is Joel being speculative on this, but what if in that moment we actually get a glimpse into the ideal of Eden, where animals could talk, they could be in relationship, and maybe that's what Tolkien is actually pulling from. And so that's why, yeah, guys, I do think that the Genesis 3 narrative is incredibly important. And then, okay, so this is one cosmic rebellion. Let's get to the next one. This is Genesis 6. This is like nothing new for the Blurry audience, but I want to point out something that might be new for the Blurry audience. So in Genesis 6, it says this. Everybody goes to verse 9, Noah and the flood, but it actually starts here. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, the daughters and daughters are born to them. And then here, the sons of God. This Hebrew phrase, sons of God, is Bene Elohim. Bene Elohim. They saw that the daughters of man were attractive. By the way, the language is very important. There's a repetitive theme that when you see something that is beautiful, you desire it and you take of it, but it was never yours in the first place to take. Chaos and destruction is going to happen right after that. In the Garden of Eden, Eve looks at the fruit. She sees it. She desires it. She takes of it. It never belonged to her. It was never given to her to have. Chaos ensues. This is the next time we see the exact same repetitive phrase that they see. The sons of God, they see that the daughters of men were attractive and they take as their wives. And then you have this consequence. And the Lord God said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. And then you have this wild story of the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. And also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them, these were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And then the narrative after this is essentially evil spreads. Evil spreads in what seems like monumental, incredibly fast ways. Now, here's the question. How in the world does evil spread? Well, there's actually an answer to this. And what's super interesting is the biblical authors, just so like, I think you guys know this, the biblical authors were literate. They read. And so what happens sometimes is we look at Genesis 6 and we isolate it out from other Second Temple writing. That's very important for us to get the context of what's taking place. Now, in the New Testament, in 2 Peter and in Jude, the biblical authors are quoting the Book of Enoch. There's all kinds of Second Temple literature that is surrounding the mind of the biblical authors, so that when they are quoting or alluding to or echoing literature of their time, they're doing so with a presumption that, hey, you and I probably have some understanding of it. This is why we do need theologians. This is why we do need to do research. This is why we do need resources to be able to go into. And guys, I know you're working on an incredible project. I want you to talk about this in a second, but I'm going to turn to the Book of Enoch. Look at the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch, Enoch 7:1, is essentially the commentary. It's giving us a worldview perspective of what's happening with Genesis 6. It says this, that the Watchers, these are the synonymous label for the sons of God, they teach humanity as a result of this unholy trade and this cohabitation with the daughters of men. They taught them, look at the language here, charms and enchantments, the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. But maybe the thing that is even more deceptive and so devastating is chapter 8. And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments and the use of, and he goes on and on. I just want to pull out a big idea here. In all of the other things, roots, being acquainted with plants, these are things that are earthly, natural resources. So you can use roots in order to heal people. You can also use roots as a way to get high, as a hallucinative, right? Swords and knives have a singular purpose. The purpose of swords is to kill. The purpose of swords is to make war. The purpose of swords is to take something that is not yours in the first place, right? And so the backdrop of Genesis 6, which is really important for us, is here are these supernatural beings that are giving information, technology, understanding, the ability to work with plants, and also knowledge of metallurgy in order to incite and to elicit their ability to cause havoc on earth, to create war, to take human life. And this is the backdrop of what necessitates the flood, because God doesn't want humanity in the corruption of what these sons of God, what Enoch calls the watchers, presents to them.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah. We do have, I guess we have an announcement to make. We're putting out our own Book of Enoch. It's coming out. We've been working on it for the last year, basically.
Yeah.
So we're actually gonna. Let's go.
we're having a party apparently.
I don't even
No,
know what just happened.
Then we partnered with Timothy Alberino. Joel, you know Tim. You and
I love Tim.
Tim were our speakers in our Costa Rica trip, and both of you guys have been on the show multiple times. Tim's a great friend. He's written all the commentary, so it comes with a commentary on the Book of the Watchers. Of course, Enoch is public domain. It's an ancient book. We took First Enoch, Second and Third Enoch to have them all there. Of course, First Enoch is the one that really matters, and the one we're discussing today. The one that, as you so eloquently put, was implicit knowledge for the writers of the New Testament, especially directly quoted in Jude and First Peter, and then as you just pointed out, it's it's really an opening, an expose, a broadening of these 4 verses in Genesis 6 that at the time, as Mike said, the Bible was written for us but not to us. It's written to these folks that had this as implicit cultural knowledge. This is what you're really hammering at with the Mavs and Wolves analogy, right? They knew this story, so to read these 4 verses was like, yep, we know what happened, right? 200 watchers show up on Mount Hermon. They impart all this knowledge. They trade for wives, and then from them, their offspring are giants, and corruption, cannibalism, blood, sin, and everything else just dominates the world until God decides to bring it to an end with the flood. But this is, something that as 21st century Westerners, we really aren't privy to without really doing the work here as you're doing on screen and really looking at the language and the literature, right? These are tools that are available to us, and while First Enoch is not considered canon, it was important enough that all the well-read people at the time and on the New Testament all were intimately related to, and intimately knew this knowledge intimately enough to quote it, write it, study it, and then, of course, it fills in the blanks here in Gen 6. So, yeah, we're releasing. I and Timothy Alberino have this joint project. The book will be out in a couple of weeks, and we'll make an official announcement on a date here very shortly.
Yeah, and I think this is I'm super excited for the project. One, I think Tim is brilliant, and I think he's the perfect person to bring some commentary around this. And then the second thing I wanted to just point out here is, some people might be wondering, okay, why should we care about this now? Well, here's why I think we should care about this now. The same enemy that is working in deceptive, destructive ways of the ancient past is just repackaging ancient sins and representing them to us in new, beautiful packages, right? So, look at this, and I want to focus in on my screen here. One of the words here is pharmakeia. This is the cutting of plants or roots. Well, pharmakeia is where we get the English word pharmaceuticals. That's that same idea. In the ancient world, these were drugs that were used in order to elicit ecstatic states of mind, to manipulate the mind, to open it up into a type of ecstasy so that you could meet with the gods. Mm-hmm. Now, why would dark forces want us to open up our minds to this type of hallucinative experiences? The reason why is so they can continue to deceive us. This is where biblical wisdom is so incredibly important. In the New Testament, Peter tells us to be sober-minded, right? That phrase "sober-minded," it's the antonym, it's the opposite of a type of intoxication that's actually connected to pharmakeia. So, in other words, to be a follower of Jesus is to have a sober mind that is whole and put together so we can think on the things of God. To allow our minds to be manipulated and compromised by these types of hallucinative types of things that are taken to an extreme, there's a real legitimate danger, and that danger is the possibility of being deceived by dark forces that are not after your good. And just because they suggest momentary good for you, right? Oh, here's how you can deal with health issues. Oh, here's how you can deal with your anxiety. Just because it's momentarily good does not mean that it's going to be eternally good. In fact, that is one of the deceptions, that it's going to be, oh, here it's a momentary goodness for you. It's going to ease your anxiety. This is the issue of pornography. This is the issue of addictions, opioid, alcoholism. There is a momentary numbing that takes place that's going to have an eternal impact on you. The Greek word narkeo, which is where we get the word narcissist from, it means to be numb over a period of time. What these watchers are doing in Genesis 6 is they're actually teaching humanity the very things that's going to compromise their conscience. It's going to create a type of numbness to the ways of God so that they actually, over a period of time, become self-destructive towards themselves. Now, I'm already seeing in the comments a whole bunch of people right now are like, wait a minute, Genesis 6, I thought those were human rulers. How can you prove that those are supernatural beings? Well, I'm going to give you a very quick way that you can prove it. However you take Bene Elohim of Genesis 6 has to somehow make sense and be connected to Psalm 82, which we'll get to in a little bit, has to make sense of Job 1 and 2, Psalm 89, which is a cross-reference to Psalm 82, and then also with Paul's language of powers, principalities, and authorities in the New Testament. I don't have enough time to get into all of that, but I've got really, really good news for you. I went ahead and took an excerpt of my dissertation where I actually give the exegetical academic kind of argument for why it is incompatible for the Genesis 6 sons of God to be human rulers, and I put it as a resource for you. So my buddy Jorge is going to put a link here for where you can get it. Basically, you'll just go to the Instagram post that is collabed with me and Luke and Nate with Blurry Creatures, and you're just going to comment SOG, and we'll send you that resource.
It's
now,
right on the comments already.
It's right in the comments already. Now, the very next question everybody's freaking out about is, what in the world, Joel, are you using? How in the world did you get that whole Hebrew conception of the world? And how do you have the Greek on the right? Like, what the heck is going on? Luke and Nate, I've done this enough to know that whenever I'm going to do this level of teaching and exploration, I'm going to have to bring on a very special friend. And I'm excited because this is actually the first time that you guys are going to meet him. And his name is, I call him Uncle Scott. So Jorge, go ahead and put Uncle Scott on the screen.
Give me just a second because he, was just lurking in the back. So I got to make sure that I got Uncle Scott ready to go here. So give me just 1 second to make sure that I got Uncle Scott. Just go ahead on and talk awkwardly amongst yourselves until I get this. Yeah, until I get this going for a second. Got to make sure that Uncle Scott is all set to go. Yeah. All right, so
really set.
Yeah, let me see.
These baseball
side
references.
by side. Oh, okay. So I got to bring. I know what to do to bring Uncle Scott here. I just got to swap one camera.
Hey man, the tension is rising.
Yeah. So I don't have a drum roll.
Can they hear Uncle Scott?
Yeah, they can hear you. Yeah. Actually, I could actually put you full screen, but because you were lurking in the back and I was enjoying the show so much, I just dropped the ball to get you framed.
What Jorge is saying is he started to just absolutely drool all over the place when he started to see pharmakeia and the Greek text next to the Book of Enoch.
Yeah, because my Adderall is gone. I'm taking my nootropics right now, and I'm still not seeing any Nephilim. So I'm like, hey, something's wrong with my stuff. So I'm bringing you guys in here, and then I have to reframe both of you guys, Luke and Nate. So just guys keep talking until I bring this guy in.
Okay, let me keep going really quick with while Jorge is doing that, let me just keep working through the text here and why Genesis 6 is so important. So I talked about the fact that these same supernatural beings are impacting the world today. Now I want to make a clarification on that. The Genesis 6 supernatural beings are imprisoned in Tartarus. They are right now imprisoned. There's a second rebellion that takes place after Genesis 6, and that happens in Genesis 11. And this is the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, in Genesis 11, when it starts, it says this: now the whole earth had one language and the same words as people migrated from the east. A pro tip when you're studying the Bible: whenever God's people are going east, they're typically going away from the providence of God and into the place of pain and persecution. So east is a biblical thematic theme and idea that's actually typically negative, right? Now, if you live in a house and it's pointed east and you're panicking, don't you worry. This is just a principle. This is not a policy. You're going to be totally good. Jesus is death, burial, resurrection on the cross totally has you taken care of.
I did. Go west, young man.
Yeah.
Smitty.
Smith, he told us the truth. We knew.
Luke and Nate, look at this. They go east and they find a plain in the land of Shinar. Quick question.
Right.
What is absent in plains? And Jorge, just let me know whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
What
so
is
Scott
absent
is
in
up,
plains?
Scott is up now on the screen.
Okay, let me finish this thought and then I'm going to have Scott come in. What's absent in plains?
Water.
Mountains are absent in plains.
Got it wrong.
Mountains are absent in plains. This is why they build a tower. And it's actually a specific type of tower. It's called a ziggurat, temple tower. Yeah. And again, this is that cosmic mountain idea. Like, it's vital for them to try to now force God to come down. And they build this temple tower. Now, you and I have to read the impact of Genesis 11 in light of Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. This is the divine council worldview. At the end here of Genesis 11, in verse 7, it says, come, let us come down, and they're confused their languages so that they may not understand one another's speech. So verse 8, so the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of the earth, and they left building the city. And that's why this place is called Babel. Now, in Genesis 10, all the peoples had their own, I can actually show it. All the peoples had their own languages, their own clans, and their own nations. But then Genesis 11, they have one language. This is kind of like Tolkien, right? One ring to rule them all. You can have the presence of unity and diversity. What gets taken away is the one language. Now, if Luke spoke German, Nate spoke Irish, or let's say French, and Joel spoke Telugu because I'm Indian, and we all spoke Hebrew, but Hebrew was taken away, and who do we go to in order to hang out? Other people that spoke German, other people that spoke French, and other people that spoke Telugu. This is exactly what takes place in Genesis 11. People disperse and they go back to their ethnic, national backgrounds. Now, this is where things get wild. Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. This is the background. This is the conclusion. Think of the Marvel scene. You know, the very end, we wait for an entire movie. At the end, the Marvel scene comes up and it's like Thor's hammer, right? Or it's like not the Eternals, the Marvels. I don't know if you guys watched the Marvels. It wasn't good at all. But the end scene is the only reason that you want to watch it, right? And the end scene is epic. So what happened? This is the end scene. Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind. Well, wait a minute. When was mankind divided? Genesis 11 is when they were divided. He fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, Bene Elohim. So this is, again, why a supernatural reading of these texts is so important. And then verse 9, but the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is his allotted heritage. So why is this so important? This is where the gods of the nations come across. In Deuteronomy 4:19, this is what Moses is warning, and God through Moses is warning the people of Israel. Beware lest you raise your eyes to the heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the host of heaven, this is a synonymous phrase in Hebrew for the sons of God, you will be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them. Things that the Lord your God, look at the language, has not allotted to the peoples under the whole heaven. This is where the gods of the nations come from. And now people are trying to figure out, Joel, where in the world did you get these resources and tools? This is where Uncle Scott is jumping on to give us that information. Uncle Scott, you there?
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Look at that. Look at that beautiful
He's
beard.
muted me. There we go.
So the first thing I think we need to start with is, I said uncle, and they're like, one dude has a deep tan and the other dude is definitely not. How in the world does that work?
Yeah, you want to tell them or
No,
'cause
this is your.
By
every
the way,
time we say
I just
that-
want to interrupt rudely and say one dude has a superintendent, the other dude is about half transfigured. Okay.
Hey, I like that. I'm transfigured. I'm gonna use
I
that.
thought you were going to say translucent, but that's cool.
Yeah, so Joel is my nephew by marriage. So my wife Michelle's oldest sister, Candy, is Brittany's mother. It's not too hard to follow. So Joel is my nephew by birth.
Call him Unc, Joel.
So that's how we're
yeah.
related. Not by birth. I just said by birth. Okay.
Yeah.
By
By spiritual
marriage.
birth.
But yeah, I
Somebody-
guess so.
Birth.
Yeah, so as you know, Joel, I arrived home from Europe last night, so jet lag is smacking me hard right now. But good to be here, and yeah, excited to show everybody the power of this amazing tool that you've been zipping around in for the last was that almost an hour now. So yeah, anything else to say before I give them a real quick test drive of Logos 10?
No. Maybe you can
No.
talk about how horrible the Patriots are, but that might be
Hey,
a,
but
a
we
burn.
signed Drake May to his rookie contract, but we'll get that. Let's not get off on that right now. Let's talk about Logos 10. Yeah, good to be here. I'm just going to give about a 15-minute overview. Joel has been digging deep in with this amazing tool called Logos. Some of you have heard of Logos, maybe not, but we've been around for about 32 years, and we are kind of the worldwide leader in digital theological studies. We're about 400 employees, mostly headquartered in Washington State. That's where I'm at right now, but we've got people kind of all over the world, actually. But most of our employees are here in Bellingham, Washington. Actually, Joel was a part of our team for many years before moving out to the East Coast. And yeah, the other number I like to put out there is we just hit 250,000 books in our format. So the good news about that massive number is whatever your interest is in theological studies, Logos has substantial content for you. So don't do it now. Later, you can go to logos.com, type in your favorite author, your favorite subject, and I think you'll be absolutely blown away at what we have to offer again for your studies. But what I'm going to focus on for the next 15 minutes or so is Logos 10, which is our latest and greatest. So in 32 years, we've only had 10 major releases of Logos. This is Logos 10. And it's amazing. One of the things I'll put out there, especially if you're on a Mac, is Logos 10 is the first version actually coded for Mac. We've had Mac for a while, but it was very sluggish. So if you're on a Mac, Logos 10 is unbelievably fast. It's very fast on Windows as well. But for all the Mac diehards out there, you'll notice a huge speed enhancement with Logos 10. But when you first open it, this is what we're looking at right now is
Scott,
the home.
you need to share your screen.
Oh, yeah, there we go. People,
Yes.
who's this guy talking about? So, all right, again, jet lag. All right, can you see Logos now on the screen?
Now they can.
There you go. This is the homepage. Not going to take a whole lot of time, but when you first open Logos, this is what greets you. The top part is the dashboard. This is your personal life. So you set this up, your prayer journal, your reading plans. I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan, so I've set C.S. Lewis up as my morning devotional. But you, again, choose whatever you want up there. And then down below is the Explore section, where every day it just brings me articles from my library, blog posts that we manage, and things like that. Actually, a great blog post this morning was how should we think about AI and Bible study? It was a very fascinating blog post there. But again, I kind of liken it to a theological newspaper down here that changes every day, again, with blog posts, articles, and so on. But the power of Logos is over on the left. And I'm going to show you 2 or 3 key features. You've seen quite a few of the original language features with Joel's teaching tonight. But over on the left, I'm just going to cover a few of the key features. The search button is very powerful. I'd say the greatest thing that Logos does, the most amazing thing it does, is search. The ability for it to search original language text, search through thousands of books in seconds. Searching is really the power of Logos. Now, if you're new to Logos, though, I wouldn't probably start here. I would say the best thing in Logos is called Factbook. It's right here. We're going to go there in a moment. But Factbook is where most should start their studies. But I did want to show you a couple of the amazing search abilities in Logos. For example, I'm in search. Notice I have a Bible search. If I wanted to specifically search the biblical text, I have a fact book search, morphological searching for the languages. But I want to show you with the all search, which is a new searching capability in Logos 10, that when if I come in here and type in divine counsel and hit enter, for me, Logos just read 5,000 books cover to cover, done. Okay. So again, the greatest thing Logos does is save you a massive amount of time in looking for content. And as I look here, actually, I see one of the key Bible dictionaries in every Logos package is right here called the Lexham Bible Dictionary. And when I open up the article on divine counsel, this is a very, very lengthy article on the divine counsel written by Dr. Michael Heiser. So Dr. Heiser was our in-house resident Hebrew scholar for 14 years. He actually lived in the same town I live in right now. Our kids grew up together. Mike and I were very, very good friends. But you're going to find a lot of Dr. Heiser all throughout Logos because he wrote quite a bit of content for us while he, again, was our resident scholar. So again, imagine searching divine counsel through 5,000 books. It doesn't take a second, but in Logos, it does. But I want to show you the most amazing new feature in all of Logos 10. If there was one feature that I think the first time I showed Joel, I had to show him 2 or 3 times because he didn't believe what I was doing. Every conference that I speak at, I just got back from 2 weeks in Europe speaking at various conferences. I show this feature everywhere, and the reaction is always the same. It's utter jaw drop, like, I can't believe what Scott just did. And it's right here called books. So I'm going to click the books search. And I'm going to hold up the camera, a very popular book, Dr. Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm, and it's paper. Okay. So I've read this, ton of information here, but many times I want to know now, where was that thing that I read in this book, right? Paper. That's the problem with paper, right? Where is it? So if you have Logos 10, you can actually launch the Logos mobile app. You have to have Logos 10 Gold or higher. I'll explain when we conclude the various libraries and the very, very, very special offer that we have for my nephew, Dr. Joel Muddamalle, because I pulled some strings to make sure Joel got the best discount. But here's a paper book. I'm going to launch the Logos mobile app. So Logos is mobile. And there's a new feature called the Print Library ISBN Scanner. Now, the ISBN is a little barcode on the back of your theological books. So I've launched that. I'm going to point it at the back of the book, and it just said, added Unseen Realm to your searching. Now, what is Scott talking about? Because this is paper. Logos is not paper. So now that I've added the searching ability of this book by just scanning the barcode, I'm going to go in here now, and I'm going to type in the word Nephilim. Okay. And I'm going to hit enter. Now there's 2 sections. Downloaded books is your Logos. This is your silver, gold, bronze, platinum. I'll explain the different levels and library packages we have, but there's your downloaded books. It just read my entire Logos library in a second for all the information on the word I typed. But this is the new feature, Print Library. And if I open this up, we are going to see right there, what do we see? The Unseen Realm, the book I just scanned with the page number. So if I go now right here to page 189, which I'm going to, man, this book is so huge, right? Page 189. And there is the title of this header is Nephilim After the Flood. So there is the word that I just searched for, and it tells me what page to go to in my book. So this is a tremendous feature. There's about 100 books that were always my favorites that I would go to quite. Now I've scanned them all, and now I search them in Logos in a nanosecond, and I know what page to go to. So that's a brand new feature in Logos 10, the ability to scan the barcode of your theological books. And it does have to be a book available at logos.com. You don't have to own it. But if it's available, that means we have the file, and that's what we're feeding you, the searching ability with the page number. Now, drum roll. I'm going to show you the best thing in all of Logos is this feature right here called Fact Book. And the reason why I say it's the best feature is, you know, for 32 years, Logos has been, I think, the best tool on the planet for theological studies. But for many people, they would load it up and sit there going, I don't know where to start. You know, I have a Hebrew word, I have a passage, I have a concept, I have a person, a place to think. Where do I go on Logos to look for this? Fact Book is where you can start. So you can see here right now, I'm doing a personal study on the attributes of God, God's omniscience, God's omnipresence. So I type in the word omni and I get them all. But look what happens when I type in the word Trinity. Look at the nuance here. Trinity in Scripture, Trinity in the New Testament, Trinity in the Old Testament. That article was actually written by Dr. Michael Heiser. It's one of my favorite articles about the Trinity in Logos. But again, I typed in Trinity, and look at the nuance that I have to study that concept. So you can type a concept. You can type in a passage, a Hebrew word, a Greek word, a person, a place, or thing. Now, listen, I've been doing this for 27 years now. And one of the most disturbing trends that I see right now in the church is the church is now going to Google for its theology. And listen, that's not a safe place to go for your theology. Okay. So that's what Factbook solves. You're going to go to a place with solid theological content written by real scholars, not AI, real scholars, and super orthodox content. Okay. Great content in the Factbook. So that's me typing a topic. Now, what would happen if I type in a passage such as Ephesians 3? Look what happens when I type in Ephesians 3. Notice that it found not only key passages, but not only key passage, key pericopes or themes in the passage, but it also pulled out major ideas in the passage. You know, if I go 1 Peter 1, again, I've got passages and I've got topics. Okay, so I love the fact when I type in a passage, the Factbook's asking, hey, Scott, do you want to study the passage or do you want to study a topic in the passage, right? So I love that choice. I'm going to focus in tonight on Ephesians chapter 6. And again, we've got the armor of God, living according to Christ, 3 uses of the law, intercession, prayer. So there's a lot of things happening, key things happening in this text. But I'm going to go ahead and select armor of God. That's the thing I want to focus on. So when you type in a passage or a topic, you decide what you want to kind of hone in on. I'm going to hone in on armor of God. Now, right out the gate, in the passage guide for a passage, we are going to bring you to a commentary. Commentaries are the big, massive volumes of works that were written to help you interpret or understand a text. And then dictionaries, encyclopedias are for a topic. But here's the Lexham Context Commentary. Get a couple paragraphs, but if you click read more, the entirety of the commentary opens. So we give you a couple paragraphs and you're like, oh, that looks good. I want more. Click the read more button. Now, this is probably one of Joel's favorite features. It's one of everybody's favorite features. I call it a fan favorite. But inevitably, you're going to find something in Logos that you want for the blog post you're writing, or maybe you're leading a Bible study, or you just want to cut and paste something you've discovered in Logos into a document. I'm going to highlight anything in Logos. This works in any resource in Logos. So I've just highlighted that paragraph. That box automatically appears. I'm simply going to hit copy. So there we go, hit copy. I'm going to go to the word processor I've got waiting on me, and I hit paste. And here is the fan favorite. There it is, but go to the bottom of the page and we automatically cite the reference. That is a massive feature in Logos. And you actually can pick your citation style. APA, MLA, Turabian. We have all of the citation styles. So again, whatever you cut and paste from Logos automatically will be cited. And as Joel knows, because he bugs me about it almost weekly, coming this summer is the cut and paste citation for the iPad and Android. That's going to come as well. So right now, this feature works on your desktop, but pretty soon on your tablets, you'll also be able to cut and paste and get the automatic citation. Media, if you're teaching and you need some media, we'll create your slide deck. I mean, one little click here, and Logos just created my entire slide deck. If I wanted to teach on Ephesians, look at context, map, timeline of this particular letter, outline, and so on. So we'll do this for every book of the Bible. Key passages, but I want to get to the bottom part because I think it's the best part of Factbook. And it's the section called Dig Deeper. So the top part, hopefully for many watching tonight, is going to replace you going to Google. This is where I get my quick answer on a passage or topic. But if I have some extra time and I really want to dig into a topic or passage, I get down to the dig deeper section as fast as I can. And there's 3 sections here: layouts, guides, and workflows. Layout, simply lay out on the screen the books you need to accomplish one of these tasks. So for example, if I click Bible and a commentary, guess what happens? a Bible, and a commentary opens up. And you'll notice too, they scroll with each other. So as I scroll through any passage, I've got my commentary right there. So that's what that layout does. Again, it just lays out on the screen the books you need to accomplish this particular task. Okay. So that's what a Bible and a commentary layout is. Now, guides are the bread and butter of Logos. This is hours and hours and hours of research done in seconds. We'll come back there in a moment. But I wanted to go here to workflows because I wanted you to see that one of the workflows that we built in. Now, what is a workflow? A workflow is a methodology. It is you being able to sit beside Brian Chappell, David Allen, or Michael Heiser. So Dr. Heiser wrote a workflow for us, and this is his methodology for studying a text. So basically, Mike is sitting right next to you and walking you through his methodology to study this particular passage. So Mike was really big on digging into Bible dictionaries. So again, you could go to your top tier dictionaries. There's your links right to the dictionary articles. So here's the big idea. When Mike says, hey, I would go to top tier commentaries, not only do we tell you this is an important step, but we put the actual link right there on the screen. So if I want to jump back into the Lexham Bible Dictionary, I click the link right there and I can type in anything here, David, type in, angel, whatever, and you're right into the article, right? So again, it's not only the step, but it's the resource. So Mike was big on ancient literature. So step 2.1, Mike says, hey, examine the parallels in ancient literature. There they are. Here's your apostolic fathers. Here's your church fathers. Here's your Dead Sea Scrolls. Here's your apocryphal. Here's your pseudepigrapha. Here's Philo and Josephus. So again, when Dr. Heiser says you should look at your ancient literature, we put that material right there at that step. So again, if you count to 6, you are actually studying the text the way that Dr. Michael Heiser would study the text. And the other thing I really like is Dr. Heiser wrote questions to kind of help you think through what you're reading and what you're looking at so that you're looking at it properly, asking the right questions. So again, it's not only his methodology, but when you open up one of the steps, such as, hey, let's look at cross references, there are all the cross references right there on the screen for the passage you're studying. So that's the power of a workflow. But let me, in closing, show you guides, because this is, in my opinion, most powerful thing in Logos. And I'm going to click the passage guide, because what Logos just finished doing in about 2 seconds, it's a little slow tonight, 2 seconds, right? Is 100 hours worth of biblical research. And I actually think that's a conservative figure. And what I mean by that is, look at all the information Logos just brought back to me in the passage guide. And I got here from Factbook, commentaries all lined up, parallel passages all lined up, cross references, there they are. Important words. If you want to study the text like Joel, where you're digging into the Greek, into the Hebrew text, we pull out the key words from the original text. All your insights right here. Click the word there, and there's all of your Greek dictionary articles for that. So again, if anybody's been watching, you're like, I really want to do word studies and dig at that level, that's the section right here called Important Words. Thematic outlines. If you're a teacher, Logos has amazing resources to help you teach the text. Okay, so here are your key topics that can be taught from the text. If you want to do a study on angels opposed to God, this would be your study, right? And you can just literally watch this. I'm going to go, hey, I really want to teach this little lesson on demons here in the text. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out my word processor. I want to put it right here. And I want you to notice what happens to all of those passages when I click copy. So I'm going to click copy. Logos just put that in the word processor. But what did it do with every single passage that was referenced? It looked them up. Okay, so I'm ready to go. I can hit my men's group on Wednesday night now, hit print, pass it out, have an amazing study. Okay, so the study helps and the teaching helps, and Logos are incredible. Cultural concepts, understand the cultural nuance in the text. Systematic theologies, but listen, Scott's still scrolling. I'm making a point right now that what Logos did in nanoseconds is literally hundreds of hours. I mean, there's my theological journal articles. There's my figurative language, audio messages, and so on and so forth. But again, passage guide is my favorite thing in Logos for studying a passage. The topic guide is my favorite thing for studying a topic. But that we got all this by just starting in Fact Book with a topic or a passage, and then getting down here to the dig deeper section. Now, in closing, and then I'll tell you about the special offer that we have for tonight's live stream. I want to show you something called interactives, and there are hundreds of these in Logos. I only have time to show you a few. And what interactives are is a way to visualize the text, because we live in a visual culture. I think it's important today, if you're teaching, if you're in ministry, to visualize what you're teaching. But even personally, as we study, we learn so much if we can actually see it with our eyeballs. So let me show you a few of these to plant the seed, but there are hundreds of these in Logos. The first one that I want to show you is called the Psalms Explorer. Okay. So here are all 150 Psalms. If I jump down here to Psalm 82, there we go. And look at this. I can have the Hebrew for Psalm 82, the parallelism, the structure. So you can be incredibly geeky and scholarly as you examine any particular Psalm. But look what we did on the right-hand side of the screen. One click by book. I'm now looking at the 5 books of the Psalms visually. Okay, and notice that Psalm 119 is the biggest dot that we see on the screen. What is that telling us? Exactly, that's the biggest psalm, right? So the size of the dot is actually informing us. It's telling us something, the size of that particular psalm. Click author, who wrote what? What did David write? What did Moses write? What did Haggai write? What did Solomon write? Structure, I wish we had some time to show this, but if you're familiar with literary types and ways that the Hebrew authors would use literary devices in the text, you could do a full study here. But genre shows me the theme of the Psalms. And we see here that most of the Psalms deal with lament. Okay. Maybe someone watching wants to do a teaching on trusting in the Lord. I now know the 6 Psalms that deal with trusting in the Lord, but being able to see the Psalms based on its major theme is awesome. I love looking at the Psalms this way, right? Bible Books Explorer, another incredible interactive where I can get a full breakdown on all the books of the Bible. If I click here on the book, gives me the summary information for that book, the key people, places, things, and I click the button, it goes right to Fact Book, so I can do a whole study on Genesis right here. But this is what I wanted to show you. It's called Intertext. This is an interactive that shows you how the Old and New Testament talk to each other. So if I float here on Romans, what we're seeing here is that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, those are all cited in Romans. Okay. If I come over here to Psalms, what we're saying is Psalms is cited in these New Testament books. Okay. So we're getting to see how the Old and New Testament interact with each other. But if I click on Psalms, this is the proof in the pudding. This is where Psalms is cited in the New Testament. So this is an incredible way to see how all 66 books talk to each other, inform each other, and so on. Last one I'll show is called Before and After. I've not been to the Holy Land yet, but someday. But we're going to take you to key archaeological discoveries, the Holy Land, Greece, the Middle East, and so on. You pick where you want to go. Let's go to Jerusalem. And everything on the left goes to Fact Book. So if you want to know more about a Jebusite or David or Herod, click it, Fact Book. But look what we did. This is a satellite image right now of Jerusalem, but take that bar right there, scroll it across the screen. We show you what it looked like at the time of Christ. So this is now, this is then. So listen, I apologize if there's anybody tonight that decides, okay, I'm getting me some Logos. That's incredible. You are going to lose some sleep, meaning pretty soon here, it's going to be 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I promise you, you're going to be in Logos digging and clicking. And I mean, that wouldn't it be great to lose 3 hours of time because you're digging in the scripture. But in conclusion, let me explain the special discount that we're offering just for this live stream. And there is a cutoff period. Okay. So we only allow this discount for a short amount of time, and it's 25% off. And Joel knows, because I've done other live streams with him. I think the maximum I've ever offered was 20%. So 25% is quite significant. And again, there will be a cutoff that I'll explain here. But let me go over the various libraries that we're going to cover tonight and the monthly option. Bronze is a great place to start. General Bible study, 150 books. That's not what it costs. Don't have a heart attack. That's the value of the library. Meaning if you were to buy all the books, Bibles, commentaries, dictionaries in here, be about $8,000. That's the normal price. That's the special live stream discount price at 25% off. But here's the good news. At the website that I'll give you in a moment, if you'd like to spread this out over 14 months for $40, you can do that. After 14 months, you're done. This is not subscription. After 14 months, you own it forever. Just going to help you budget it out a little bit easier than that big full price. Silver is where I want to push a little. I think this is where you should start, because this adds the Greek and Hebrew ability of study. So the interlinear things that Joel's shown, you kind of want to be at the silver level for that. That's why we call it our word study library. That's the value. We had about 5,000 of Greek Hebrew texts. That's the normal price. That's the special discount price for a week. And there's the monthly. If you want to do silver on monthly, $53. But gold is our number one selling library because it has every feature in Logos 10, including the print book scanner. So if that interests you, but every feature in Logos starts at the gold level. That's the value of the library. That's the normal price. That's the special discounted price. And the monthly on this one, we're going to do a special promo. Notice we've kept that down at about the $50 mark, very close to silver. We're going to spread that out a little bit more, but I got to give you some instructions on how to do that. Okay. And you'll get that in a moment. Now, last two, platinum is our theological library. This is kind of our academic library, seminary type library, because it adds some of the key commentaries. It's a massive upgrade on commentaries. That's the regular price, special live stream. And the monthly is $86 a month. And then lastly, we have our doctoral library. I think this is the library that Joel has. Massive theological library. That's the normal price, the special live stream. And the monthly is $114. Now, Logos works on everything: Android, iPhone, iPad, desktop, laptop, Mac, PC, everything. And here's the benefits. You own this forever. Husband and wife can share a single purchase of Logos, because the Bible says you're one. We don't mess with that. So you can share with your spouse. 30-day money back. And we do have free training. We will teach you how to use this. And the videos are fantastic. So we'll send you that. But here's the website that you have to get to by next Tuesday, midnight. At midnight next Tuesday, this website is gone. And this will be the lowest price for the remainder of the year. So 25% off is the best price for 2024. So you got to get to this website, logos.com/Joel, by midnight next Tuesday. If you're interested in the special gold offer of $55 a month, that's not available at the website. You got to email webinar@logos.com. We'll reply to you with the couple steps you got to take, but that'll get you the gold at $55 a month. So it kind of keeps that price down. And again, after 24 months, you're done. Now, in the subject line, because I do a ton of live streams, and I want to make sure you get the 25% off discount, you got to put somewhere in the subject line, hey, Dr. Joel live stream, I'm really interested in that gold at 55. Just something that jogs my memory, my mind, that we've got the special offer for this live stream. If you have old logos, email webinar@logos.com as well. We'll look up your old account. You'll get a big credit. You just pay the difference on the new features and so on. But again, you've got to email webinar@logos.com by next Tuesday. I'll leave this up on the screen for a few moments. I'm done. But again, all the information is at this website, the webinar, email, upgrading, everything. If you just get here, and Joel's new book, we have a special offer on that, is also available at logos.com/Joel. And I'm done.
Thanks, Scott. That was huge. Scott, you didn't see it, but Luke and Nate were having some antics off screen. They've got this cool feature. Go ahead, Luke. Do it. Do it. You guys do it. Yeah. Wow. Look at that.
Actually, I was texting Luke. Look, what you need to do is make a heart sign with both of your hands. All right. Go ahead. Come on, no, guys.
Nate, what kind of heart is that?
That's
like,
man.
That's some like pagan heart.
There you go. Look at that. He's sharing the love.
I can't see it because I just have my logo screen on. So somebody take a screenshot of Nate's little. Hopefully, it kind of looks like that, I guess. But
this is one part.
Yeah, and Nate and Luke got gold today, so they are ready to seriously study. Like Dr. Joel showed us tonight. But I'm telling you, Logos is game changer. It'll be an amazing investment in your biblical studies. Free training, free customer service. We'll support you. We want you doing better Bible study. And so again, the special offers through next Tuesday, midnight. That website gone. So you got to get there by next Tuesday.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Uncle Scott. Well, hey, I want to just emphasize something that's actually kind of important here. One of the things that I loved about Dr. Heiser during my dissertation is Mike would consistently send me resources. Like, he was a resource, like, library fanatic. And it made a pretty significant impression on me. And I remember one day Mike and I were having a conversation as we're working through one of my dissertation chapters, and he just said to me, you know, he grew up in a time and an age where academic theological resources were hidden. They were like either super ridiculously expensive, or you kind of had this ivory tower thing where unless you knew Greek and Hebrew, unless you knew these and these things, you couldn't get access to them. And the impression that Mike made on me is, and this is like my life mission now, is the accessibility of theology for every person who loves Jesus. Like you should have accessibility to it. And so I'm uninterested in doing the Wizard of Oz thing where I'm like hiding all the really cool resources that I've got behind the scenes so that you just have to always come to listen to me or Luke and Nate. Like, I really believe that God wants his word accessible to the everyday average Bible reader. And so that's one of the reasons why I thought this was important to have Scott on, so that you guys could have access to it as well. We've got a couple more things we want to do before we close our time together. As you can tell, it would be very easy for us to spend a lot of time, but Luke and Nate, I want us to jump to Daniel 10. When was the last time y'all turned to Daniel 10 to study?
We talk about this passage all the time, right? Because we focus a lot of our talk about around angels upon, you know, on actual biblical descriptions of the way they operate and the way they move. And did they walk into Sodom? Did they wrestle with Jacob? The angel Lord came and ate with Abraham?
Yeah.
This is a fascinating verse. You know, because the angel gets held up, right, by the prince of Persia. This angel be dispatched by God to bring Daniel this message, and it kind of throws a lot of it's a big monkey wrench into the idea of angels being ethereal and poofing and showing up wherever they want, whenever they want, right? Which is really kind of a medieval way of thinking about the supernatural that I think we've kind of fallen into this rut. Like, angels are here; they just show up when they want, and it doesn't appear scripturally that they operate that way, or that the angelic travel operates that way. So, I love that we're going here. Take us where you want to take us, Joel.
Okay, so the question is, where does Daniel get his theology from? How does Daniel even contrive? How does he even understand Daniel 10? Like, where is he getting it from? And the answer to this is Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9, read in the aftermath of Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel. Now, a couple important details I didn't get to, and just for the sake of time, Genesis 12 is the story of God calling Abram out of Ur of the Chaldeans by way of Haran on the way to the Promised Land. Now, really important detail: Ur of the Chaldeans and Haran is it is geographically located in and around, guess what? Babel. That's right. So what does this mean? This means Genesis 10, 11, and 12 has to be read together in context. Let's not separate 10 by itself, 11 by itself, and 12 by itself. So you have the nations of the world of Genesis 10 that were present before they were disunified. You have Genesis 11, and you've got human rebellion, where the one language is taken away and the nations are split up. And then you've got Genesis 12. This is epic, that God reaches into the very epicenter of rebellion, and he calls one man and his family out of rebellion to become an agent of his mercy in order to invite the nations one day to come back into the family of God. So the whole idea is you get the gods of the nations from Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. So we're talking about things like Baal. We're talking about Molech. We're talking about Ishtar. We're talking about Nana, the moon goddess, which, by the way, there's a massive temple to the moon goddess in Haran and in Ur of the Chaldeans. So there's this big question: why, when Abram with his brother Laban and Terah, when they're leaving and they make a pit stop in Haran, why does Terah the father bounce? Why does he leave? Well, here's why he leaves. He's terrified. They understood the gods as being gods of geographical locations. They are leaving their geographical location into a land that is unknown to them. And now Terah is going to be like, wait a minute, did Abram really hear from Yahweh? And is this God actually superior and powerful? Because the second I leave the geographical area of Haran, I'm leaving the protection of the gods. Now, again, small detail. When we say gods, we're using the technical term in Hebrew, Elohim. Elohim is a technical term for a disembodied spirit. The context determines how we ought to understand Elohim. Elohim, in reference to Yahweh, this is a Heiser phrase. It is a distinction because Yahweh is species unique. Yahweh is Elohim, but no other Elohim can ever be Yahweh. So this preserves the understanding of God as one. This refutes polytheism or binitarianism or henotheism, like all these different views of polytheism. But what it makes room for and space for is for the uncreated God to create supernatural beings that are disembodied spirits by nature. Now, here's what's fascinating. Just because they're disembodied spirits doesn't mean that they are ontologically limited from being embodied. And Luke, you address that, right?
Joe,
Yeah.
I'm gonna bother you for a second. Can you stop sharing and start resharing again? I've been paying attention, and I don't know if I don't see your mouse moving. So okay, I can see it now. Move your mouse.
Yep.
Yeah, making sure that we're still good. So never mind.
Yep.
I'm just trying to make sure that the audience get the full experience.
Yep. So you've got the idea that these supernatural beings can still be embodied, right? This is the angel of the Lord experiences, which I'm going to argue is experiences of the pre-incarnate Christ. This is where these angelic beings, supernatural beings, come and they eat with Abram, right? That there is physicality that is connected to them. Now, we kind of did all that legwork to get to Daniel 10 because the question is, where do we get this sense of geopolitical territorial spirits? Where do we see this biblical theology of these sons of God that were given as stewards? My language is so precise, guys. I'm trying to be very, very clear. They were given as stewards of the nations, not to elicit the worship of the nations, but to protect them until the time that Yahweh is going to bring his family back together. This is what Deuteronomy 4:19 is doing for us. It's letting us know that at some point in time, this is the story of Lucifer, they not only received human worship, they elicited human worship. They enjoyed that glory. They went into rebellion, and in so doing, they created a antithetical household to the household of God. They created a cosmic divide, a household divide, and in that, it's like the Marvel, that one Marvel movie where like the Avengers get split up. One is being led by Captain America, that whole deal. By the way, there is no new narrative that's not biblical narrative. All the best narrative is biblical narrative. These guys are just ripping off the Bible in a lot of ways. And so all that's taking place. Okay, let's jump to Daniel chapter 10 with all that information. Look at what Daniel 10 says, starting in verse 12. It says, "Then he said to me, 'Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand,'" and look at the language, "'humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard and have come because of your words." Just a side note here. In a hyper spiritual world where there are real demonic, malevolent, evil spirits that are bent on the destruction of God and his people, we actually have a way to fight spiritually in spiritual warfare. And Daniel gives us one of those ways. Guess what it is? It's so simple, but far from being simplistic. It's prayer. Here's Daniel, who prays. And as he prays, this prayer is an act of spiritual warfare. And what the text explicitly is saying, that as a result of the words that were being prayed, here this angelic being comes in order to bring aid. Verse 13, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was there with the kings of Persia." Look at the plural kings there. Fascinating. "And came to make you understand what is to happen to your people." And he had spoken all these words. This is fascinating. Verse 16. So you've got this angelic being. You've got the prince of Persia. You've got Michael, one of the chief princes. But then another figure is introduced. And I want you to think, who could this other figure be? And then it says this, "And when he had spoken to me according to these words," so Daniel turns, "I turned my face towards the ground and was mute. And behold, one in the likeness of the children of man." At this point, all of our brains should be exploding with the mind-blown emoji. Who is one in the likeness of a children of man? This is the pre-incarnate Christ. This is an allusion, an anticipation to the incarnation. This is a retelling of a divine council scene of Isaiah 6, of the throne room of God, where Isaiah is touched on his lips with a burning coal from Yahweh himself. There's a conflation of these stories on purpose to show the unity of God, that God is Yahweh and Jesus the Son is ontologically one. And there's this whole Old Testament idea of the two powers in heaven. I don't have enough time to get into that. And here's what happens. They touched my lips, and then I opened my mouth and I spoke. And then verse 18, this is wild. Again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, "O man greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you. Be strong and of good courage." This echoes to Joshua, which, by the way, the whole narrative of Joshua is conquest, is to deal with the giant clans, right? So this is an echo back to the impact of the Nephilim in the time of the conquest of Canaan and the persistence of evil there. And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." Then he said, "Do you know why I have come to you?" Yo, this is so epic. "But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia." Who the heck is the prince of Persia? I'm going to make a claim here. And this is a claim that Heiser made, that John Walton, I think, has made, some other Old Testament scholars have made. But now I'll return to fight. The prince of Persia is none other than Lucifer. It is the embodiment of this demonic figure who is at the head of one of the most evil empires known to man. And it's the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these except Michael, your prince. Now, on the right-hand side, what you're seeing here is Greek. Now, this matters. You're like, wait a minute, Joel, you're reading from the Old Testament. I thought it was in Hebrew. It was. The Old Testament is written in Hebrew. In Daniel, you've got some Aramaic. Why am I showing the Greek? Because the Hebrew Bible, around the time of Ptolemy, one of the generals of Alexander the Great, was translated from Hebrew into Greek. This is very important. In terms of scholarship, one of the ways that we can make connections to the language of the New Testament is to see how the Hebrew Old Testament was translated into Greek. Well, how is it translated into Greek? Notice this. The commander of the king of Persia. The Greek phrase here is strategos basileos. And then commanders, in reference to Michael and this angelic being, is archeton. Okay, where do we experience and see these exact phrases? Well, I'll tell you exactly where we see it. We see it in Ephesians 1:21. When Paul talks about Christ, who is risen from the dead, seated high at the right hand of the heavenly places, look at this language, far above all rule, this is arches or arkanton, authority, exousia, power, dunamis, dominion, kuriatos, and above every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the one to come. Where is Paul getting this language? Where is he getting this understanding? And how in the world do we then get to Ephesians 2:1 that talks about the prince, the archon of the power of the air? Well, who's the prince of the power of the air? We're talking about Lucifer. Who's the prince of Persia? Oh, what? The Bible is connected and woven together as one story. And then you get to Ephesians 2:18-21. This is what I did my doctoral dissertation on. It says this: "For through him, through Christ, both have access in one spirit to the Father. So then you're no longer strangers and aliens." Well, when did humanity first become strangers and aliens? When was the Jew-Gentile divide? When did this first take place? The Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is where you get the Jew-Gentile distinction. And so now you have the fulfillment of what is anticipated in Psalm 82, where the nations are going to be re-inherited to Yahweh. And so then you're no longer strangers and aliens, but you're fellow citizens and saints and members of, the Greek phrase here is oikos tauteo, members of the household of God. Now, that word oikos, household, it can mean temple, it can mean kingdom, and it can mean a physical household. Guess what is in mind here? All three. Just like the Nakash of Genesis 3. All three are in mind. Why? Because God's kingdom is a family. God's a father, and he's got a divine family and a human family. It is a temple, because we're talking about how we're all royal, priestly children of God. And it's also a kingdom. It is the kingdom of God. And all of those are being placed together. And so, and then I'll just give one last one, guys, and then you guys can ask questions or, be like, this was the lamest thing I ever experienced. But 1 Corinthians 2:8. This is what Paul says. He says, none of the rulers of this age. Well, what's the Greek word for rulers? Archonton. Where do we see this again? Daniel 10. Okay. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Right? Well, what is this talking about? This is talking about the reality. Remember what I said, that the ancient worldview never separated earthly and cosmic or supernatural. These two things were always intertwined. And so in the story of Jesus, you have the presence of earthly rulers and supernatural rulers. You have dark powers, these rebellious sons of God that are working in human systems and structures through human rulers as well, in order to set what they think is going to be the most epic trap for Jesus. And they send him to the cross thinking that at the cross, Jesus is going to hang himself. He's going to be defeated. What they don't realize is that in the same way that in the story of Haman and Mordecai, that Haman is building the gallows thinking that he's going to hang Mordecai, Haman builds the gallows and he hangs himself. This is what 1 Corinthians 2:8 is saying. None of the rulers of this age understood this, because if they had, they would have never hung themselves. When they send Jesus to the cross to die, they think they win, but what they actually inflicted upon themselves is a mortal wound where they hung themselves. And how did they hang themselves? This is where Ephesians 3 matters. This is why I go back to the nations of the world. Look at Ephesians 3. The mystery, this is also a word that's connected to Daniel. The mystery is that the Gentiles are now fellow heirs, members of the same body, and partakers of the promise in Christ Jesus. Verse 10, so that through the church, the ecclesia, the manifold wisdom of God might be now made known to who? The rulers, the authorities in the heavenly places. Rulers and authorities cannot be human rulers in heavenly places. It's incoherent with the text. So if we're going to read all of this together, we see God's great plan to have his family all back together and to deal with these rebellious supernatural beings. And the way that God deals with them is through his son, Jesus. This is what happens in Psalm 82. The resurrection, this is where it says that God, Elohim, has taken his place in the divine council. The first Elohim here is singular because of the single participle. And then the second, a singular Elohim can't stand in the midst of a singular gods. The second Elohim has to, by Hebrew grammar, be plural. So Elohim, mitzvah, all this has taken place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Well, what is the problem? What are these Elohim, these supernatural sons of God that have done evil? What have they done? They haven't rescued the weak. They haven't taken care of the needy. They've brought injustice, affliction, and destitute. They walk around in darkness. And then this is what the psalmist said of God, Yahweh saying, I said, you are Elohim, sons of the Most High. All of you, nevertheless, like men, you shall die. If these were human rulers, it makes no coherent sense for them to have the consequence of all earthly human rulers anyways. The only way this makes sense in terms of coherence with Genesis 6 and Job 1 and 2, and now with Daniel 8, 9, and 10, and with Ephesians and Corinthians and Colossians 1:13, wouldn't even get into that. Like, the only way this makes sense is for these to be supernatural beings. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince. These are human rulers. Fall like any prince, okay? Okay, verse 8. You guys have heard me say this before. I think this is like the most epic moment of this entire psalm, where you have this figure who's almost off stage. This is like theatrical. This figure's off stage, and he's waiting, and he's listening to all of this take place. And all of a sudden, at the very end here, Yahweh says, arise, O Elohim, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. Well, who is this Elohim? I believe it's the pre-incarnate Christ. It's Jesus who is waiting in eager anticipation to come and to defeat death through death itself, and so by doing, to defeat the evil powers, so that now they're in judgment for their rebellion, and they have been stripped from the ability to blind the nations. And this is why 2 Corinthians 5 is so important, that the ministry of reconciliation goes out in and through God's human children, that we proclaim the good news of the gospel. That's probably the fastest I've ever done all of that, just so you know. I think I broke a record. So,
Well done.
Yeah. That was 101. Very fast.
Well done, Joel. Quick question. the story of Haman and Mordecai. Where's that found? So we can send people there if they want to read that sort of expose.
That's true.
Is that necessary?
Say that again. Yeah, it's in the Book
Haman
of
is
Esther.
story.
Book of
Yeah.
Esther.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the Book of Esther, and which is a fascinating whole detail about the Book of Esther, because the Book of Esther actually never names or mentions God in the entire book, right? And so again, notice, what is the structure of Esther? The structure of Esther is done in such a way that we actually feel the presence of God at every corner. He doesn't have to be implicitly stated. And there's like this whole bunch of these are like ironic reversals that take place. Well, it can't be ironic reversals unless there is a providential God who is working in order to take the foolishness of man and usurp it, subvert it with the wisdom of God. And that's one of those things. So you have almost behind the scenes these two powers at play. You've got the dark forces against God and his people. That's what genocide is essentially happening. And there's a human ruler to depict all of this. But behind the scenes, you've got the providential God who is flipping the entire thing on its head.
Let's go. I like it. I feel like a lot of times, like Joel, you can marry it all. You know, you bring it all back into one pie. And I think sometimes I don't know what it is, but we've separated all these things, and it makes it more complex and more confusing. And I think that on our show, I think a lot of what we try to do is just say, nope, the weird stuff still happens. You know, the sightings still happen. This supernatural realm, this even these words, these things they never went away. And it's been weird and blurry since the beginning. And sometimes it's easy to be skeptical and just be like, okay. Guess it was weird back then, but it's not happening today. But it's always good just as a reminder that these things still happen, and not as maybe not for everybody. Not everyone has an experience they can't put into words, but for the most part, I think it's good to remember. So thanks, man.
You're welcome. Hopefully this is like that foundational, like, oh, we can go back to this and be like, okay,
yeah,
now I kind of see where, how to make sense of these weird, strange stories of scripture,
And I think if you haven't listened to our episodes with you, Joel, if you're listening and have not, a lot of what we covered is sprinkled throughout that, whether we talk about territorial spirits in our first episode we did with you, which is your dissertation, where you talked about Laban and about the teraphim. About this understanding at the time of Abram and Abraham that of the way that these nations were governed by these Elohim, and what those gods meant, and the way that they and then one of the things we'll be releasing at some point too is there's an amazing conversation at Costa Rica with I said it and I'll say it again. My most favorite conversation we've had on Blurry Creatures is you and Tim talking about galactic galactic something and what was the title, and cosmic warfare. We were galactic warfare and cosmic geography, and we were talking about the interrelated things between sort of the things that are happening in certain places for certain reasons, and all that ties into understanding this Deuteronomy 32 worldview that these angels, Elohim, whatever the Greek and the Hebrew, they were given these nations to govern on behalf of the king, and they rebelled, as you put. And I think the interconnectedness, what always amazes me, especially when you run through these studies, Joel, is that the Bible's 66 books, but the interconnectedness of and the way that it creates this linear story across time and space is beyond comprehension, and only works because it's divinely inspired, right? And I love that, because we're jumping from Psalm 82 to Deuteronomy to Genesis, and then to Ephesians and Paul, and all these things work and are connected and build in this crescendo, right? That is a story of God had a family, and humanity was part of that, and then humanity decided it wanted to do its own thing, and the entire story is about God redeeming humanity back into the family of God, and this is how it works. But I think sometimes when we talk about the things we talk about in our show, Nate, like the understanding the players is an important part of understanding the chessboard, right? And in order to do that, you got to understand the way that things played out, these three rebellions, the territorial, the cosmic space, the players, the judgments on those players, as you talked about in Genesis 6, in those angels being judged in Tartarus, it says in First Peter, and also in the Book of Enoch. And then you talk about these other Elohim, which were the Deuteronomy 32 angels that are judged in Psalm 82, right? And it starts to make a lot of sense too, because we live in this fractured world that as we all walk around and live and go to work and do our things, there is a definite evil. There is an enemy to our soul. There is a force that is against the things of God and against the kingdom of God. And you know, how does that work? And how does that operate? And then how does God operate in all that? And I think these are the reason I love what we're doing here. These are the foundational pillars of understanding, you know, all the weird in the Bible and elsewhere through a biblical worldview. But you got to start somewhere in understanding the way that these rebellions happened, the way that the ancients believed in the supernatural, and as you said, did not divorce those two, and putting ourselves back into the head and the sandals, if you will, of the audience that this was written to, and understand it like an ancient Semitic person, not like a 21st century Westerner, right?
Yeah.
I think it's such a crucial perspective that not enough times do we end or land there, I think, you know, on Sundays in church necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, and I think for me, it's also like, hey, I think the way that the enemy works often is not, and I said this earlier, it's not necessarily like they're not like giving us blatant, false, negative, evil pictures. They're in the business of deceptively and brilliantly and beautifully numbing us to our own death, you know? And they're taking God's good creation, the very good things that God has given us, and they are subverting it from the inside out so that these good things actually become vicious things in our life because they become ultimate God things. And anytime we do this idolatry exchange, we're actually participating in the economy of the kingdom of darkness. And this is like what Jesus is doing. He's like, hey, let's get rescued out of that, you know? And so, yeah, I think like the blurry stuff that like, and even as I'm a listener, I listen to the Blurry Creatures podcast and episodes. I love Judd's work and Sandra's work. Like I just love so many of it. You know, I'm not going to go there. There's a particular episode that I want to talk about, but we have to do it for like late night blurry. Like maybe we'll introduce and we'll have to bring Tim on. We'll have to bring Tim on, but even stuff that I disagree with, you know, and that's the thing that I loved about the conversation with Tim was like, Tim and I see some things very differently, like starkly different. And I love when one night we're hanging out, Tim said this, he's just like, man, we just love Jesus. Like it all just has to come back to Jesus. Like if we just come back to Jesus, like, you know, we can figure out our areas of differences as long as we land at, and Jesus is the point of where we're going. Keep the main thing, and be encouraged and stretched because my views have been strengthened and I've become a better student. And I've fought against theological dishonesty through exposure to stuff that, you know, academics sometimes are afraid to talk about. Theologians are afraid to talk about. We're afraid to have these discussions in churches. And it's like, I'll be like the first one, like, dude, I don't know. You know, was Rahab a planet? Was it Jupiter? It's on one of my lists to study. Like maybe Tim's right. Maybe he's not. I don't know.
It's all a framework to make sense of the things that happen today. And I think sometimes people are grasping at straws, trying to figure out, okay, I was out in my backyard, I saw this UFO. How does that make any sense? And they'll abandon their faith because nobody ever gave them the framework to make sense of, okay, this is how a UFO can fit into your faith, your theology, into the Bible. And I think that's what you're helping bring this theological side to people who listen to our show and had a paranormal experience, have seen something, or just can't explain it, you know? And because it falls outside of anything anyone talks about in church, they sort of think that the church is old school. Church is like dinosaur. They can't explain modern phenomena. They can't explain the UFO and alien narrative. They can't explain these things. Well, it's not true, you know? And I think it's always good to bring more of the theological side in, because sometimes, you know, like as Luke and I have experienced in the paranormal channels, it just stays weird. It just gets weird and stays weird. And there's no explanation to it. Like, where does it come from? Okay, if all these creatures are out there terrorizing and terrifying people, where do they come from? What's their origin story? How are they here?
What are they up to? What's their aim? What's their ambition? You know, is there a strategy to it? Is there not?
Yeah. And you need some kind of framework to make sense of it. But more and more experiences that we hear, the more we're like, man, it's not only is it a thing, it seems like there's a lot of them, and we need to talk about it at least, to try to help people make sense, because some people are getting, particular people are having encounters with these things daily, and they don't know how to make sense of it, and it's really hurtful and hard when you try to explain it, and people they have this skepticism, and I think that's a modern deception. What we're talking about, like the broad brush of this whole conversation, is that I don't think ancient people were as skeptical. I don't think ancient. It seems as though they all had some sort of paranormal framework and understanding how the world worked. Maybe they disagreed on who was the top, who was controlling it, who was in charge of that, but they didn't have this skeptical nature of, oh yeah, we can't believe any of this stuff, which I think Luke and I have a lot of these conversations with people like, you actually you talk about this is your job. This is what you do. You talk about this weird stuff. It's like, well, yeah, because so many people they have no answers to these things, and more people have experienced something they can't explain. But if culture wasn't so skeptical, we wouldn't be able to do this. So it's a good thing for us that this stuff has to kind of live on a fringe podcast. But man, Joel, we appreciate it. I don't know if we're wrapping up here.
Yeah, we are. I mean, and I would just, the last thing is like, the aliens, the UFOs, like there are some very real questions that our culture and our society is dealing with. And my primary belief, my primary supposition, presupposition is this, that Christians, people that understand the biblical worldview on its own terms, should be like the all-star team that is going to go out and win the gold. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not the backup team. We're not the D League. We're not like, we're not the G League. Like we should, and yet we're often sitting on the bench. We have the best, like, this is why, like, we did a whole other hour on this. We actually have the most coherent, best explanation that the culture and society is like, UFOs, extraterrestrial, they're trying to wrap their brain around this cosmic supernatural realm. When we take a look at just these paradigms that we've looked at thus far, we actually have a biblical framework that brings the most coherence for these questions. And so as Christians, like, man, we ought to engage at such a level that keeps the main things, where we have a spirit of humility, where we can say, this is about to the level where I can get with my, kind of definitive answers. And then this is speculation, but at least it's informed speculation.
Well, I think it's important, Joel, because a lot of Christians will downplay the stories that people tell them, the things that they see, the experiences they've had. They'll say, no, that's all demons or whatever. They will take these stories and they will tear them apart in front of somebody. And anyone who's down some of these rabbit holes will, I think, encounter a problem with their faith. They're like, no, I've seen gray aliens. I've seen these things. I've encountered them. You can't tell me they're not real. And when a Christian who's so afraid of addressing these things tells them, no, that's not happening. That's not actually a manifestation of anything. It'll damage that person's faith when they're looking for answers. So I think it's good that if we start with that supernatural framework, we can only build from there. But it's funny how a lot of Christians don't want to get into the supernatural stuff in their own Bibles. And like Heiser says, I'm not going to protect you from it. So,
Joel, I like what you said, though, because I think you nailed it. Like, we have the best answers. And what I think is fascinating, and my final thought on this, is that you're seeing major players and major media start to come around to this, whether it be Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan, having delved down all of this and coming back around saying, I think this is supernatural. I think this has to do with a supernatural phenomena, right? And these are people that are mainstream voices that are now exploring, at the very least.
Yeah, they're talking about the Nephilim, right?
Yeah, they're talking about the Nephilim.
Before some Christians are going to talk about the Nephilim.
Which
Rogan's
is wild, right?
Yeah.
It's wild, but these are the answers that we have in our biblical text, and it's leaking into the sort of the mainstream conversations about these fringe topics.
Yeah.
And the reason that it is it's the best answer.
Exactly.
And I think you can get into the weeds if you don't provide the proper framework to those answers. And this is what we're doing here. This is the framework.
Yeah.
And that's what I love having, like, a theologian on board, because Nate and I, we just interview folks, right? And we've got 4 years of interviewing folks. And so there's a lot of requisite knowledge here, but we are not theologians, right? And so to bring this back to the semantics, to the linguistics, to the text, what does the text say? And then how do we apply that? That's what we're trying to do tonight. And that's what you did tonight. And that's why it's so great to have you in this space, in our space, a part of what we do, a part of our events, a part of, You know, you're coming to BlurryCon 2. You're in Costa Rica. You're becoming a major voice for our audience. To, you know, as Mike would say, what does the text say? Let's get back to the text. What does the text have to say about this? And I think if we live there, which we're trying to do in this space, is filter that everything through that text.
Yeah.
This is where we're going to find the best answers. As you say, we're the A team when it comes to explaining the weird that's happening now, because here's all the framework, and it's been this way for millennia. And it's funny to see it. We're almost coming back around. Everybody's waking up to the realities that the ancients knew.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and just because I can't help myself, you know, this is what Deuteronomy 32:17 is saying. They sacrificed to demons, Shadim, that were no gods, Elohim, to Elohim they had never known. Now, is Moses contradicting himself? No, not when you have Deuteronomy 32:8 and 9 and all these other passages. Look, to new gods that had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded. Like, this is the biblical paradigm. The question of the Nephilim, you know, is like, I think a lot of people, even in the questions I saw, like different questions of how do we handle the Book of Enoch. I know that's a big part of, you know, your guys' next resource that I'm super excited about. Like, why should we care about the Book of Enoch? And I would just say, you know, like, why would we care about, if you are a sports analyst, that you're going to study LeBron James and you're going to determine, is he the GOAT? Well, it would be insane. It would be lunacy to say, well, I don't have to at all think about Michael Jordan. Like, I don't have to at all think about his stats, his data, his era. Like, the best analysts are like, of course I have to. Of course I've got to consider the environment and the culture and the context and make comparisons. You see, guys, we do this in our everyday life consistently. And my question is, like, why is it when it comes to the Bible, we get this thing where we get so fearful, where we're like, oh, it's not in the canon of Scripture. Oh, it's not. Like, it is absolutely possible to hold the tension of saying the Bible is authoritative. I believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. I believe that it's divinely inspired. 66 books over 2,000 years, 3 languages. Like, I'm in on all that. One cohesive story, authored by the one divine God. Like, I believe in all that. And I believe that God providentially wrote through human mediators in their own culture and time. And so if that is the running narrative around them, why wouldn't you and I like be like, oh, we have access to Second Temple literature? Oh, wait, the way that the Second Temple period, the intertestamental period, the way they would have understood demons of the New Testament are unclean spirits. Where do you get unclean spirits? You get unclean spirits from Genesis 6, the Nephilim, the spirits of the disembodied giants. Like, oh, you know, like, it actually brings clarity. Why are these beings terrified when they meet Jesus, who, by the way, is the first exorcist of the New Testament? Like, talking about exorcisms, Jesus does what is never done in the Old Testament. Never once do you find exorcism in the Old Testament. Guess where you find it everywhere in the New Testament? Jesus. Why? Because he's literally cutting off the heads of demons and letting them know, by the way, the kingdom of God is not just coming, it's here. It's already, but not yet. Like, this is why all this stuff matters. You know, it gives us language and understanding. I just went on a rabbit trail. You guys, any last thoughts? And then Jorge's going to come in. He's got some important kind of info as we wrap up.
No,
that was great. That was putting a cherry on top, Joel. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Jorge.
All right, gentlemen. Well, first of all, thank you all for allowing me to be here today. I am just the simple I will say architect, engineer of the stream. I want to thank both of you guys, Nate and Luke, for being part of this. Joel, awesome to put this together, man. We got to do it more often. And with that being said, I want to remind everybody that I know we had a baked in ad about logos, but we also have a free resource for you. The Sons of God booklet that you're seeing on the screen. All you have to do is go to Joel's post, or if you follow Blurry Creatures, all you have to do is go to that post that they are part of and type the letters SOG and you will get a direct download. It's 100% free. Also, take advantage of the Logos Bible software discount. I tell you, Logos, I'm not a scholar, and I sat at the feet of Dr. Mike Heiser for almost 4 years on the daily basis because we still run all his social media, and I'm the producer of the DCW, the Divine Council Worldview podcast with Mike Chu and Dr. Ron Johnson. And this resource right here changed my life. Me being just a layman in terms of scholarship, now I can actually speak intelligently about the DCW, about what these Hebrew terms actually mean. I live with an ancient Israelite in my head. I am able to know that I got to read the Bible in its context to produce the text and all of this. And it's because of Logos that afford me the ability to study as a scholar without being a scholar. Now, also, Finding Peace Through Humility, this amazing Bible study written and recorded by Dr. Joel, is something that you need to avail yourself of. So go ahead on. I'm going to put the link on the chat, and then we're going to have the links on the description and the YouTube channels, both on the Blurry Creatures YouTube channel and on the Joel's YouTube channel as well. The Hidden Peace, his latest book. Make sure you pick up a copy. Not only pick up a copy, pick up a couple of copies, give them away, and write a review, because that's the way that we get more people to see the book. And lastly, make sure you become a member of the Blurry Creatures community. All you have to do, I'm going to put all of this on the chat. Okay, so make sure you come in here and you support this amazing team, because I'll tell you, listen, like I said, I sat with Heiser, and Heiser used to say it is easier to evangelize at a UFO convention than sometimes at church. So you have to do this by learning how to communicate the way that Nate and Luke know how to do it. And by doing this, you support their work, and then you have an amazing set of exclusive content coming to your door, and have a community of, the whole community of the Blurry Creatures podcast with you. And with that being said, Luke, Nate, thank you for this. Joel, thank you for this. And let's go ahead on and wrap it up, gentlemen.
Thanks,
go.
Peace.
Roll it out.